Thank you all so much for joining us today. Mr. C.K. Ranganathan, President AIMA, Mr. Pati Singhania, immediate past President AIMA, Mr. Shrinivas Dempo, Senior Vice President AIMA, Mr. Nikhil, Sawhney, Vice President AIMA, ladies and gentlemen. It is a real pleasure to have you with us this morning and a very warm welcome to you to AIMA's 7th National Leadership Conclave. As I said, it's amazing to actually see everyone in person again after 2 years of virtual events. While the ability to gather online has been of great value, it does not allow for the same warmth and bonhomie as that being under the same roof does. As a responsible organization, we are still following the COVID protocols and learning from our experience of holding online events for over 2 years. We are also live streaming this event on all our social media platforms, including Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Today's event is It's a truly hybrid event in all respects. We even have a couple of speakers joining us online, and I hope you enjoy that experience. However, I'm sure that despite the effort and time involved in getting here, all of you who are gathered here today will enjoy this experience much more, of actually physically being present in the same room. Mr. Ranganathan, it is a pleasure to have you with us. This is your first physical event as AIMA President, and I hope a start to many others. Your encouragement and guidance have been extremely valuable in resuming normality at AIMA, and hopefully, COVID will recede further now and allow us to deliver a much richer experience to India's management fraternity. Many thanks for joining us. Mr. Singhania, it is wonderful to be side by side with you on the AIMA dais. You have the distinction of being the only AIMA president whose tenure had no physical events, but your agile leadership allowed AIMA to pivot quickly to the digital operating model and continue serving management students, executives, and leaders. Thank you so much for joining us today, and a warm welcome to you. Srini, it is a pleasure to have you with us, and many thanks for being with us at the NLC. It is great to have you on the CEO's panel, and we look forward to hearing your views on what leaders must do to keep up with the rapidly changing world. A very warm welcome to you. Nikhil, a pleasure to have you. One of the young leaders of AIMA, you bring a next-gen perspective to AIMA. Many thanks for agreeing to join the CEO's panel to deliberate on the great reset in the economic environment and business leadership. A warm welcome to you. A warm welcome to all my many past presidents and members of the AIMA Council who have joined us today. Your support and guidance is extremely valuable to AIMA's continuous evolution. I'm also delighted to welcome many leaders of our local management association who have joined us today from all over the country. A very, very warm welcome to all of you. You really are our extended family, and we are delighted that you have joined us today. A very warm welcome to all the other dignitaries and delegates who have taken the trouble to be with us this morning. It's a pleasure to have you. Ladies and gentlemen, the past couple of years have been tough for most businesses, but they have been great for those with capacity for online commerce and remote work. The technological bias of the new economy has come through loud and clear to everyone, and digitalization has gone from something in the future to an immediate compulsion. Leaders have had to learn to lead from a distance and to create organizations that can operate either in the virtual or physical worlds. Now, as hybrid becomes a way of life, business leaders are relearning leadership, as it is much more complicated to merge the physical and the digital existence. Technology is still just one of the pieces of the new game. Given the rising frequency of unpredictable twists and turns, leaders must learn to develop a matrix of capabilities to make their organizations more agile, resilient, innovative, and competitive at no extra cost. The geopolitical events have also thrown a spanner in the works for many business leaders. With power struggle among major economies bubbling over, leaders have to rework the calculus of supply chains and market. The entangled web of international cooperation and conflict is making it difficult to settle on where to produce and where to sell. Business leaders are called upon to join boycotts and are in turn boycotted. However, they must learn to effectively navigate this developing reality and enable their organizations to gain from the turbulence. We have a panel of outstanding CEOs to tell us how business leaders are approaching this complexity. With these words, a very warm welcome to all of you once again, and I'm pleased to hand over the session to Mr. Singhania. Over to you.
Thank you, Ms. Sethi. As I request Mr. Pati Singhania, immediate past President AIMA, to conduct the session, it is my privilege to introduce him to you. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Pati Singhania is the immediate past President of AIMA and Vice Chairman and Managing Director, JK People Limited. He is an MBA from University of Massachusetts and is an alumnus of Harvard Business School. Mr. Singhania is responsible for the paper, dairy and defense business of the JK Group, which is one of India's largest industrial groups. He is an avid reader, golfer, and auto enthusiast. Sir, we request you to kindly conduct the session.
Yeah, it is. Thank you. With your permission, since this is going to be a panel, I'm not going to make any remarks there. I'll start off here. Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to you. It is our first physical meeting at AIMA after what seems like forever. So actually, while we were in the waiting room, Rekha made a comment. He said, Mr. Singhania, I realized that this is my first physical meeting after you became president and so on with you. I said, well, it's nice of you to say that after having, after my having finished the term and, but there is a difference between being a virtual president and being a president virtually. I hope you'll appreciate a little bit of that. But well, thanks. CK, Ranganathan, President AIMA, and Chairman Managing Director, CavinKare Limited, Mr. Shrinivas Dempo, Senior Vice President AIMA, Chairman Dempo Group, Nikhil, Sawhney, Vice President AIMA, and Vice Chairman Managing Director of Triveni Turbines, Rekha, Sethi, past presidents of AIMA, all the gathered dignitaries, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to have you at the 7th National Leadership Conclave. And what today's topic is really a new thrust, reimagine, reform, redesign, rebuild. Now, we've all gone through the last couple of years with the overbearing COVID pandemic and the way it's changed lives, business lives, social lives, community lives, and personal lives. So while we have talked a lot about COVID, I think the key thoughts that come to me are that even before COVID struck, things were slowing down. And with the onset of COVID, everything went into a complete tizzy. All supply chains have been horribly disrupted. There have been so many uncertainties around lives, around futures of people, around how businesses will run, or indeed any institution, indeed how even the government would run. Parliament was running virtually. Imagine that. So everything has been a very, very major change. That apart, we have the latest issue of the conflict now with Ukraine and Russia. But we can't blame everything to that. Supply chains were disrupted, as I said, inflation is looming large, a whole lot of other uncertainties. As technology has come to the fore, as people have become acutely aware of climate change, because in these 2 years we read more, we watched more things. So all of these things have had a profound impact on the way that businesses run, on the way that organizations run, and therefore how should management be. So I'd, with your permission, like to largely focus on, not the pandemic part of it, but how do we see things going forward. And all three of you are leaders and established leaders in your businesses in the country and successful CEOs. So I will dispense with formal introductions as far as, if you agree, and we'll jump straight into this. So, CK, my first question to you would be really, and actually I'll ask this of everybody, what would you outline as 2 or 3 major changes that you see in the way that you are doing your business now, as opposed to, say, a couple of years earlier? This need not be an exhaustive list, but just how you see this.
Thanks. Good morning, all. Thanks, Harsh. I see a big change that's coming. You can see some of the trends if you look at the digitization that's happening, Industry 4.0. I think it is very important that we embrace the artificial intelligence is going to make fundamentally redefine the way businesses are done. Earlier, technology is an enabler. Now it's going to be a strategic tool. So I think that's very, very important trend I see. The other thing I think everybody would have read in the papers, the Great Resignations. And that's also a trend we need to factor in. So a lot of resignations, 80% of the people are thinking of shifting their jobs. And that's very, very important. That's also poses to be a big challenge. How can you build an organization when people are not stable? Because it's important that we definitely address that. The other thing, third one, I would say the global disruptions, the Ukraine war, and the kind of pandemic that hit us hard. And you can't relax. You can say, oh, now the pandemic is behind. But still, I think this will come back. We are seeing outside India, a lot of countries are going for a lockdown. And I wish the herd immunity of India is going to save us as we go forward. I would only say from that angle, pandemic I will address first. There are 3 parameters I would say that's very important. Government need to look at. I'm sure now that it's no more the central government going to monitor it, and it's an endemic. That's the way we need to treat. One is hospital beds availability, oxygen availability, and then the mortality rate. If these 3 parameters, anyone is raising up, I think one need to get worried, is what I would say. So otherwise, I think we need to carry on the business as usual, is one of the things. With regard to the Great Resignations, the employees are looking at what's the value I'm going to get. I'm in a hurry to grow up. My compensation need to go up fast. I need to grow fast in my life. And that's very, very important. I get bored. I can't be doing the same job again and again. So that's a very important ask from the kind of this thing, the employees of the new millennium. And it's important we recognize that. What we are going to do is kind of this thing. Already we have a learning and development function within HR, but we need to accelerate. We are looking at acceleration, working on as much as possible, individually measuring their moods. That's a moodometer. How they are they happy? And what are we going to do to ensure that they are really engrossed in their job? They are not looking outside. I think this is very closely to be monitored and measured. And course correction need to happen. So the learning is a very, very important job. One of the things that we said is, don't allow a person to do the same job more than 2 years. So similar kind of job, look at that, how you bring in new tastes and new value additions to the job is very important. Make it interesting, make it challenging, which is a very important thing we are doing. The other one, I think the digitization. I was talking about it's no more an enabler, but it's a strategic tool. And we have seen business fundamentally, those who are not transformed, the technology orientation being the center of whole organization and the business model, technology as a center of the business model, is redefining the traditional companies. I don't want to be, again, one more history in that point. So what we are looking at is how do we kind of enable, it is our own team members educating them, but keeping that at the center. Can we ensure the complete stakeholder end-to-end, right from my vendors to vendor, to kind of the thing end consumer, how do I digitally link all of them? And it's not easy. We are dealing with millions and millions of customers. So what is very important is in this, the first starting point is data governance. I can control my data within my organization, but can I control it with my other stakeholders, with my vendors, with my distributors, with my retailers? I think unless I play a role in enhancing their capability and work along with us, I think the fundamental with the data, I think how you take very key decisions, how you get a lot of insights from the data, how you navigate the future based on data is going to redefine the thing, is what I would say. Besides all the technological automation, I can't become irrelevant, is how I see. I stop here. I think I'll go on and on. I think I'll wait for others to respond.
So, Srini, on the same thing, what would you outline as a couple of things that you see and what you have started doing in your organization?
Thank you, Harsh. And let me first say how happy I am to be here. It's a packed hall, something that I have not seen in the last couple of years. And it feels really good. Though people propagate a lot of hybrid models, I'm a man who thinks that I would love to go to office every day and meet my people. I think hybrid model gives a lot of fatigue, according to me, though many companies are looking at a hybrid model and employees also are expecting the same. Harsh, if you ask me, I think CKR has put some very valid comments. But in addition to that, I would say that there are three things that I look at. One is, of course, digitization that CKR talked about. The second thing is talent retention, because that's becoming a huge challenge. I heard an employee that day of a multinational who's gone and told his boss that he wants to work 6 months from his home, and that home can be in Thailand on a beach, and 6 months in the office. And if he allows, then he'll stay, or if he doesn't allow, he'll go away. And these are challenges that not small companies like ours are facing, but huge MNCs. And where are they going? They're going from MNCs to startups, which is much more riskier in terms of job. But they're getting fat paychecks, they're getting flexibility in working hours. So I think the whole culture, and that's why I said that, every organization needs to build now a culture that probably defines your company, where your employees are happy, as CKR says. So I think this is another challenge. And the third challenge that I see is sustainability. Because though many of the Indian companies at our level are not seen doing enough, but I think this will catch up very fast. And we won't even know what's hit us below our belt. Because many companies, if you go to the West and see, ESG companies are getting premiums, non-ESG companies are not getting premiums. There is a lot of proliferation between, social and political activism. So a CEO is no longer seen as only a chief, executive officer or chief operating officer. He has to be a saint, he has to be a politician, he has to be an opinion maker, connect with the community has gone up far more significantly. And I'm saying that even in a state like Goa for me, where earlier I had not to spend so much of time, because it's just that, the environment was such that the family was known. Today, a large part of my time goes in trying to meet with community, connect with communities, say how the business benefits them. So all this is going to, I think, activism, probably in a more positive way, will take much more precedence than what we have seen. So these are few of the challenges. But with all this, what I feel is, I think, when we talk about uncertainty, I think the world has gone through uncertainty many times. And I heard one economist talking last week. He said, there are decades when nothing happens, and there are few weeks when decades happen. And we've gone through this phase now. We are still going through it. And I think we have to change the definition of survival of the fittest with survival of the most adaptable, which makes you the fittest. So I think adaptability is the key. And that gets me to another thing, that why can't we look? See, we say that we are leaders. We can look at shared leadership. Everybody can be a leader in your organization. Of course, I understand the importance of hierarchies of management, and at some stage, the buck must stop somewhere. But I think shared leadership, no more employees no more employees look at bosses as, oh, if you feel vulnerable, then is it your weakness? Today the CEO has to have the courage to say that I don't know and I want to know from you. So I think these are some of the changes that I see. And if one has to see, we have to have much more than CEO. We need to have a, we have CEO, CTO, CMO, CFO today. But we need to have a sustainability officer, we need to have a culture officer, we need to have a wellness officer, like CKR has said, which will take us organization and face the challenges that we are facing. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thanks. Very valid points, and we'll come back to some of those. Nikhil, your views.
Thank you, Harsh, and a very good morning to everyone. Firstly, it's a pleasure to be in front of you in person after so many years. But I do agree, and one of the problems of going after CKR and Srini is that they've covered all the points, actually, and I can't do anything but concur with all the areas that they have highlighted as being priorities going forward. Some of our learnings coming out of COVID were the aspect of agility, and I think Srini talked about it by talking about adaptability. I think that was forefront in our minds when we looked at how best to weather the current disruptions that are taking place, as well as disruptions that may happen in the future, be it in terms of climate change or digitizations. And some of these are tools, but as CKR said, digitization has to move from being a tool to being core to an organization, and technology at the same time has to be core. But when we look at agility, we've tried to look at it from all aspects of our value chain. We need our balance sheet to be agile, to be asset light, to ensure that we're able to move productive assets to what is going to be necessary for the demands of the future. We need our workforce to be equally agile, multi-skilled at the shop floor level and multidisciplinary at a managerial level, so that they can actually have a more holistic view of what is happening in an organization and in the world, and to be able to better cater to the challenges and risks that the world puts before them. Agility also is required from your supply chain basis to be able to ensure that you are working adequately with all aspects and all stakeholders within your value chain. Harsh, what we found as an organization coming out of COVID, which I think is a very important realization, was that none of the success that we may have faced over the last couple of years, as well as looking forward, would not have been possible without a true collaboration between the organization and its employees, the organization and its vendors, and the organization and its clients. We needed the understanding of our clients to delay the supply of products. We needed the understanding of the banks to be able to allow for an ecosystem which provided vendor financing, which provided supply chain financing. We needed the government to also work hand in hand. And I think a very important realization is that we live in a community, and this community needs to collaborate with each other. And I think that is quite distinct from the economics in which we have operated in the past. I think there's a new paradigm which we have to work towards, where we are far more collaborative, both as organizations and institutions, but as people. And that brings me back to CKR and Srini's point about people being the center of every organization and center of what we need to focus on going forward. I believe a lot needs to be done here to improve the capability and capacity. If we look at the digitization era, which everyone concedes is going to be the future, the number of jobs that will exist at the top level are going to be very few. There's a fear that you'll have many people who would be left out of the employment basket, and that we may have to become a welfare state just so that we have some degree of social cohesion. I believe that it is a responsibility of individuals as well as institutions to skill and provide the capability to individuals so that they can become entrepreneurs themselves and become true partners in what I believe is a very bright future for us. I do want to talk more about sustainability, and maybe we'd get to that in the next set of questions, but thank you.
Thank you very much. All of you raised extremely important and significant points to get us thinking. But I think these are some of the key ones that all of you, each one of you have talked about. Let me sort of add my 2 bits here. We were recently doing, year-end March, so we were doing for the new financial year our annual budgeting exercises. So, you had 2 days of that stuff done elaborately. At the end of it, you have all this. But then I was reflecting, and I told all my colleagues at the end, I said, look, these are numbers. and pardon the pun, they are on paper. So, they remain there. But the kind of uncertainty that I think we all anticipate, at least I anticipate in this particular year, when we talk of FY 22-23, is unprecedented. It's going to be as much or worse than COVID, because we really don't know. So what are we planning for? You're planning for a whole year. I mean, we don't know when your next shipment arrives, what is going to happen, whether you're being able to, do the activities as planned. In such an uncertain scenario, the word agility, adaptability, all of this comes in. So let me, Nikhil, start by asking you, since you were sort of saying that, your thunder was stolen by the other senior colleagues here at AIMA. How do we, all of us as managers sitting in this room, plan for a scenario that nobody can sort of know? Or not plan, how do we deal with it? Let me put it this way.
I think it's a tough question. There are many aspects.
I know, but I mean, I also don't have real answers, but we can all take stabs.
I think it depends from companies to companies. I'd be very interested to hear the aspect of branding, and I think CKR can talk more authoritatively on that. But from our perspective as a company, which is an industrial company, it's very important to invest into, and the biggest uncertainty for us is technology disruption. Technology disruption happening both at the consumer end in terms of climate change. We're a company that provides mechanical equipment for power generation, which is steam turbines, which to a large extent is driven by conventional thermal sources, which has to disrupt. Everyone knows that climate change is taking place. And so for us, uncertainty from a longer term perspective. We believe short-term spikes, short-term disruptions in terms of lockdowns, etc., may happen, but that doesn't change the fundamental value of the company, both from the perspective of the market as well as from our customers. We believe so what I believe is a concentration on research and development, ensuring that is your differentiator, ensure that you have a continuously improving value proposition to your client, and then again, you have to collaborate. You have to ensure that you are resilient through your entire supply chain to be able to provide the tools that are necessary to fulfill your orders. And I'll give you an example, Harsh. During the lockdown, we supplied a turbine to Germany, and Germany was under lockdown, India was under lockdown, but our customer was still wanted us to commission his turbine. And we firstly had to collaborate with him, but we used digital tools such as Google Glasses and augmented reality-based solutions to be able to deliver something which no one thought would be possible for an extremely expensive piece of equipment which has a huge degree of liability and warranty on us. So I think that adopting tools and technologies, but also keeping research and development forefront, and of course people are involved in throughout this entire scheme, is what I think is important for us to be able to weather the longer-term uncertainties.
Great point that you make. CK, would you like to comment on what Nikhil said in terms of how branding can perhaps be something which is sustainable in that sense, and how does it come into play?
I thought I will address the what is in the uncertain times, what you asked, kind of thing.
Go ahead.
So I would say that to be what's coming if you are not sure, which is a kind of this thing. It is important we need to be agile and nimble-footed. Very, very important thing. So that we can maneuver any tough situations. So what I would look at is being asset-light. What Nikhil said, asset-light is very important. If you can outsource, better do it. Don't do it by investing, kind of thing. Keep the agility high, and also people-light. And if you are going to save few lakhs by having people internal, but I think suddenly some automation will come and you will be in a kind of this thing, in a disarray. I think it's important also people light is what I would say, to become kind of this thing, any uncertainty that's coming in. And the third one I would say is the technology heavy. So while I go light on these things, my investment will be focused heavily on technology and how I keep that as a center of the organization, as a strategic core. And the fourth one I would say is how do I ensure all the stakeholders are also kind of this thing in party to the whole thing, in terms of I educate, I carry along with them in terms of in this journey, and also making them aware that these are something is kind of this thing. They need to be healthy. It is not that I push my best to them. I think I need to educate them also to be healthier so that I can carry on is what I would say. So these are the things I would say. Coming back to your question of consumer, the branding kind of this thing, I think the consumers have changed, the habits have changed a lot. The employees' habits have changed in the last 2 years. The consumers, the buying pattern and behavior, they wanted to sit at home and buy now. And that's the kind of evolution that's happening. And it's an informed purchase compared to what it was in the past about how many customers have bought, what's the rating, what's the user satisfaction level. You get to know everything at a fingertip. So what is the user satisfaction level? What is that I can get out of this product? Can I return it? All these things are a very, very important thing. So the companies need to be far more in terms of complying these basics and ensuring that my brand stands tall is a very, very important thing. I can tell one thing, that brands which offer very high utility value compared to a nearest competition. We all can remember how Maruti, when they introduced Maruti 800, then the competition was Ambassador and Premier Padmini. And when they introduced, I think the one very important thing, they looked at consumers are very simple. They don't make decisions based on 8 or 10 parameters. Simple or 1 or 2 or maximum 3 parameters are critical. Can you beat the competition on those top 2 or 3 parameters? Not by marginal, but a significant milestone is very, very important. What Maruti did is, if your kilometer, what you get in an Ambassador is a 10 kilometers or a 12 kilometer, I am going to offer you 20 kilometers or 25 kilometers like that. Significantly higher. Mileage is a very important thing for a customer to decide. And I am also offering, if you are buying a car at a 3 lakhs or 4 lakhs, I am going to offer you at a 1 lakh, 1.5 lakhs kind of a this thing. A very low price and a kind of this thing. So, but still the maintenance is low. So what more you want as a customer? So every time I think we need to keep, this will be timeless principles, but if you can offer a value that is much better than, much superior than your competition on those 2 or 3 critical parameters, you are there. Is a very important thing. The other one, consumer, it is while it is a value, and also I think it's an emotional value you need to also offer in branding. Because it's not the kind of tangible value, but an emotional value is, I take pride in owning this brand. I take pride. I am a who is who. I have a Louis Vuitton bag means, oh, I am looked at kind of this thing. I am so and so. I am making a statement. Can you make such kind of thing is also a very, very important ask. So both, if you satisfy both the emotional needs as well as the kind of the tangible needs, I think the companies can thrive and they can continue to be in spite of a turbulent times ahead is my viewpoint. Thanks.
Excellent. Srini, do you want to add to this? We have another, I think, 5-7 minutes of time.
Yeah. I think, of course, very valid points by both Nikhil and CKR. What I would add to is, and I completely agree with you, no one can take a crystal ball and try to gaze the future. But what I'm saying is, again, it's people who will come with ideas. It's people who will come with innovations, you know. And the key to looking at this is, how do you distinguish between complicated and complexity? Complicated is something that you can solve with resources, okay? You can hire a consultant. If a law is complicated, if an income tax law is complicated, we have our chartered accountant. Complexity is something that the variables keep on changing. So if the variables keep on changing, then you have to look at scenarios, not just in time, but just in case. And I think if you keep on challenging your people, and I saw this personally when everything was shut down at the end of March 2020, we did something called a war room. And that war room, I told every head of department that every day I want to meet 2 middle-level managers who have to get exposed to me. And they are the ones who came with brilliant ideas. They are the ones who solved your problems. So I think faith in your people. And the last thing, which is the old age norm, is have a good amount of cash pile ready. Because companies which are deep down, and I'm not by any means saying that you should not take on debt. Debt, of course, is healthy, and if you want to grow, debt is healthy. But in uncertainty, you need a cash pile, because if you're closed for 3 months, to be very honest, you made a very valid point, but in one of my companies, I'm covered in my raw material only till August. I don't even know as of today what will happen post-August. But I think we are all die-hard optimists, and I think we'll come to a solution.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. So, nothing like old-fashioned cash, right? To get your sort of excite you in the morning. So that's great. Now, we have some, Rekha, where is Rekha's gone? Do we have some questions from the...
Can I make one quick point,
please.
Harsh, before we go on to the audience? I think one more trend we see is because of the Ukraine war and even the pandemic is the one who initiated this. Earlier we saw the cartelization. The great cartelization is here to stay. Earlier it used to be within the country, now it has crossed borders. We have seen only in crude the cartelization used to happen between countries, but now it is, whether it is containers or anywhere, all the chemicals, key raw materials which are high investment oriented. A few people are making in the world, they are cartelizing. And poor customers, we are all paying through that. I think that's a very, very important thing the CEOs can't afford to overlook. And that's why Srini said that he is not covering beyond August. He doesn't know what will happen. So the cartelization, making things uncertain, is a very, very important thing. I leave it here. I think over to the audience.
All right, we have some questions from the audience which are coming up, but let me sort of there are on some similar things, but let me just raise one point here. All of you talked about, and rightly so, to my mind, about people and talent. One question I asked myself, and it's not exactly the same question, Mr. C.K. Sharma, but is somewhat similar to what you were saying about people wanting to change jobs, C.K. Mr. Sharma sitting there wants to ask something around that. But essentially, let me rephrase your question to a larger thing. A lot of us sitting here are people from a certain age and generation. What makes us think and tick may be different from what you, like you mentioned, today's generation, today's job market people. How do we in organizations design an organization which can sort of take into account that? And so all our talent management, learning development, HR policies, meeting aspirations, keeping people happy. You talked about wanting to meet 2 middle-level managers. So this whole concept of maybe a reverse mentoring, in a sense, how can we institutionalize this in organizations? Anybody, I mean, just a thought around.
I will go first.
Thank you.
My perspective is that I think one of the important things, the old saying, I am not telling anything new, leadership pipeline, building a leadership pipeline. I think organization need to get out of, I will go and ready-made hire a talent when somebody leaves. I think only when you have that kind of a fit and your internal company culture and the way your behavior of the people in that is not sufficient to beat a competition. Only then you should go out. Otherwise, I think building a strong leadership pipeline is very important. Earlier we thought one position, one is sufficient. But now the great attrition is coming. You need to at least have 2 people waiting to be filled up. I think that's a very, very important thing. Therefore, it goes back to people, educating people, and building a very, very strong pipeline is what I'm telling. And CEOs and the HR managers, the functional heads also, need to get out of their mindset, I will create talent pipeline within, than laterally hiring somebody and filling a job, which is the easiest thing. It also increases the cost of the organization. But I think it is a reality is that every organization need to create their own pipeline of leaders, which is a very important task is my viewpoint.
Just to add to that, I think it's important for us to incentivize innovation. And innovation doesn't necessarily need to happen only in a technical department. Every department and individual has a capacity to innovate in their own field and sphere. And once you start incentivizing that, the job fulfillment level goes up significantly, and the retention and the ability to learn, as CKR said, for you to then grow within an organization is important. So I think being innovation-led and innovation-centric is also equally important from a cultural perspective, but then executing that with people.
Great. We actually are almost out of time. Yeah. So let me do one thing, is that I think all of you made Extremely great points. And I saw some people taking notes. I hope people did, because this has been very enriching for me as well. At least I've made notes. I have a bad habit since I'm in the paper business too. Sometimes what do you do with the stuff? But anyway, I encourage people to sort of emulate sometimes. But I think just stepping back into what we've discussed, I think everybody talked about technology. That's in a way a given. But the difference that you made about a strategic tool versus it being an enabler. So enabler is becoming a hygiene factor, a par for the course. Actually, if somebody doesn't adapt it or an organization doesn't adapt it, then you're really going to be left behind. And it doesn't have to be a business organization. It could be any institution. We're seeing how government actually has done it pretty well, if you ask me, in being able to link and interlink things. Talent, I think that's another thing that we've talked about in various voices and different examples that each one of you have talked about. And that is really, really critical. Whether it's done from the great resignation, sort of movement that is happening now, or whether the need to change because markets have changed, technology platforms have changed, the way business is being done has changed. What we learned, forget our MBA schools, but what we learned maybe 5 years ago, what made us successful 5 years ago, isn't necessarily going to be the mantra for success in today's world. So I think a great part is about people, about having the right kinds of people to respond, to be agile. And I think one word that we haven't really talked about explicitly, but I'd like to bring it, is teamwork. We talked about a lot about collaboration and so on. But teamwork and people working in teams, the ability to have leaders who can get people to work. I mean, it's nothing new, but I think it's coming out to be even more sharply, because we are talking of moving away from hierarchy to sort of a collaborative and more networked organization. Changing culture internally to allow a lot of these things to happen. All of these become very important. I don't want to list out all of these, but to me, one big thing, and I say this at various platforms as well, as a manager, what do I want to do? As a CEO, what do I want to do? I think the biggest job is how do I unlearn so I can relearn what is relevant today. That's how I would look at this. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are just done with this time. We could have carried on, as you can see, with the help of the audience as well, for much, much longer. But thank you all for coming in great strength. It's great to see AIMA people and support, and that's what drives, I think, the leadership sitting here to take this organization ahead. But thank you all for coming, and it's great to see people physically. Although, Srini, I found it slightly hard to believe when you said I haven't seen so many people in 2 years, not even in Goa. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.